Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Economic Performance and Prosperity Performance Guidance Overview and whatever committee. Fire procedure. There's not going to be one this evening, but there's not going to be a fire alarm scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and the side of the room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. And if we've got members of the public, please make sure they attend. Webcasting the meeting, as we all know, it's going to be webcast. Receive apologies for absence. Resigns and replacements are as follows. Councillor Still is now Mr. Councillor Tucker, Councillor Keating, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Cherrett, Councillor Mrs. Reid, and apologies for Councillor Regan. All in my time, all in good time. Confirm the minutes of the last meeting of the 19th of February. Oh, sorry, being told decision of conflict of interest or whipping decisions. No. Urgent items now to confirm the meeting of the minutes of the meeting on the 19th of February. Councillor.
Yes, I was there, and it's not recorded in the minutes, and I think I made a number of valid and good points, possibly the best points that were made at that meeting. So I'd like at least to be recognised I was there, even if we don't recognise I said them.
Do we need to go for a vote on that? Apart from that, are you happy with those? Thank you. Members of the public, don't seem to be any. Standing invitations to the relevant portfolio holder. We will bring him in at the appropriate time unless there's anything to say beforehand. No.
Well, just one thing. I just want to make sure that there are no accusations of conflicts of interest on this one. I am a partner of a firm of chartered surveyors in London. They've had nothing to do with putting together this report. But I just want to make it clear that I, in my other capacity, I'm a partner in a firm of chartered surveyors.
Thank you. Referred by Cabinet none. Item 12 is paper B, is property and alternative investment strategy, and I hand it over to you to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, councillors and officers. The paper is the property and alternative investment strategy, and we're seeking the committee's support for a radical overhaul of our property investment strategy and support for a new alternative investment strategy. This is the culmination of over 12 months of work with officers and advisors, and I think it's important on three counts for our future as a borough. Firstly, if we do nothing, there's a real danger that the £15.6 million of rental income we currently enjoy from our property portfolio will fall away, and that's both absolutely and relatively in relation to inflation. I'd like to just highlight that revenue is equivalent to 2.5 times our rates income. In the report that accompanies the paper provided by DTZ, who are a London-based global consultancy, property consultancy, they warn there is a significant risk of a decline in revenue from the commercial portfolio. Secondly, without these revenues, we'll not be able to provide the services and facilities to our residents. And I think this is a very important consideration. It's not a case of just looking at property income for property income's sake. It's what we can do with it that's critical.
Can you move the microphone a little bit nearer?
Okay. I think the third third point in favour of this proposal is that without a more active use of our property resources, it is likely that Basingstoke's potential as a commercial, office, retail and industrial location will continue to be unfulfilled. This council needs to be a catalyst to revive new investment in new buildings fit for the 21st century occupiers and employers. It's unlikely that the market will do it on its own, as the DTZ report makes clear. We need to be putting Basingstoke back on the map and competing with Reading, Farnborough and Southampton, who've taken much more of the new investment in recent years. Without this, we'll not only fail to attract new employers, but we'll fail to retain existing ones. You've had the paper and the accompanying report by DTZ, and just to highlight a few of the sort of key points of it, we have a portfolio that's practically unchanged since it came into being in the 1970s and 1980s. So we're now at a stage where we've got aging, obsolete buildings, which frankly are unattractive to today's employers. Too many of our long leases on terms that discourage the long leaseholders to invest in renewing buildings because the percentage of the rent we take is too high. 73% of our income comes from ground leases. We have too many low-value, low-income properties that cost a lot to manage. 45% of the 380-odd properties that we own generate less than 4% of the income. But looking ahead, we do have the resources to rebalance our portfolio. It's a very significant portfolio in value terms at the moment of £257 million. And in the process of doing so, encouraging new investment into Basingstoke. Let's not forget the terrific potential that the town and the borough has, which is already being demonstrated in new investment by John Lewis Partnership and Network Rail. It's going to take a number of years to achieve a rebalancing of the portfolio, but we need to start now. The papers recommend a way forward based on an analysis of where we are today and where we need to be in the future. It is proposed to achieve this objectively by addressing and prioritising a strategy plan that would aim to, amongst other things, reduce the number of ground leases and increase the number of directly managed properties, focus new investment on Basingstoke town centre core area, long-term regeneration opportunities, and divest ourselves of non-core properties. In addition to this new strategy for our commercial property portfolio, this paper also proposes the allocation of up to £25 million of our cash invested to go to alternative investments in investor grow opportunities, in particular in new renewable green investment, such as solar energy generation, and new housing and regeneration investment. Those are all key priorities for us all as councillors and as part of the council plan. All of these should meet appropriate business case, risk assessment and minimum net income returns. So I think there's some exciting potential here, but in order to make sure that we make the right decisions, I think it's also important that we bring on board the right calibre advice. And that's commented on in the paper. The paper also sets out proposals for governance. We need to provide the necessary element of consultation and democratic influence and guidance. In relation to a pre-agreed strategy, while ensuring that as a body we can take decisions quickly to compete particularly in the fast-moving commercial property market. To give you an example there, if an industrial investment were to come onto the market in Basingstoke, in order to compete with the market, we're going to have to respond in a matter of weeks. It's not something we can do over a matter of months and hope to compete with other buyers. That's why we're recommending an all-party property and alternative investment panel, plus key officers to advise the portfolio holder and cabinet. And it would be my earnest hope that we'd build up cross-party consensus on the way forward, that we would engage those who are genuinely interested in this particular aspect of council work, so that we could achieve the right results for the residents of the borough. So I hope I hope that these proposals are ones that all the parties will be decide that they can support in the interests of the borough and its residents, and the continued funding of the services that we provide and are valued by our residents. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Garner?
Somebody has to start. The panel membership which you're talking about, you're talking about a very small panel who need to be available on very short notice. I would be more sensible to have a range of councillors who can form a panel rather than have just a few individuals who may or may not be available at short notice. So I think that's something that could possibly be looked at. You talk about the marginal properties, those that only contribute 4%. Is it the intention to try and get rid of those unless they have a strategic importance? And lastly, on the legacy systems, which portfolio holder is responsible for the fact that they're in the current state that they are?
Councillor Gardner, thank you. You make a good point, the first point, at least. No. I think you're absolutely right. We're going to, if this is going to work, we're going to need to call upon councillors at short notice, and it would make sense to have at least deputies available to make sure that we have sufficient representation by all the parties in the event that one of the standing councillors is not available. So that would be my approach to that. As far as policy towards the lower value, smaller investments that we hold, some of them we may need to continue to hold because there are sort of other non-property reasons for holding them. The other thing one has to bear in mind is that we have to do this in a very sort of methodical way. We're not. It's not a case of flooding the market with unwanted small properties, because that would damage value. So I think the whole thing's got to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But ultimately, we should be looking to have fewer, higher value properties in our portfolio. And the third point was whose fault is it? Is that for what? I think this has been going on for a very long time, and I'm responsible for it now. And I would like to think that that the work that's been done over the last year is a reflection of the fact that we are recognising that that this is something that is is important and does need to be tackled and addressed, and that's what we're aiming to do here with your support.
You can wrap on that.
I'll just come back. This is something that ARGA have been hammering on about for years, the state of the systems. I'm surprised it's taken this long for somebody to think that something needs to be done. I thought something was being done.
I can only speak for myself, and I've got on with this as soon as I possibly could.
Thank you, Councillor Tilbury.
Chair. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I expect Roger's recalling back, I think even before ARGA, the old finance panel. I remember it when it first came out, and Kevin would probably remember this, they were all held in, all the rents were in a little black book, I think, at one point. Now, this is going back when I first became a councillor, and I think there was a problem then in trying to get them onto some sort of system. But I think the point I would make, I can see the point of going down the direct managed route, and I'm sort of quite supportive of that. And in fact, I actually went along to the cabinet when we bought the mouse to support that approach there. I can see the sense of it in some things, but looking at this now, if we'd have done that in the 70s, all those hideous office blocks there, we'd probably own them now, wouldn't we? If we'd adopted that approach there. So I think we need to be a bit careful as to how we deal with this, because the danger is with some things, it's like investing in a house. Generally, they tend to retain their value reasonably well, but industrial property, the need for it changed. The big issue, I think, with a lot of them is things like putting wiring in for data. I mean, I used to work in that with data communications. Often you have to raise the floor that high. If they haven't got high ceilings, you know, everyone's bumping their head on the ceiling, and there's all those sorts of issues with older buildings. So it's how you deal with it, because the truth is, we don't know. You know, we can look back and say with hindsight they should have done this then, but they were built so they could pile loads of people on there working on typewriters. No one ever thought computers would infest the offices. They were in a basement, they're locked away from people, and that's all changed. But things are changing again, and where do we, we don't know what will happen. I mean, we keep talking about more people working from home and this sort of thing. Is there actually the demand for these sort of spaces? I think you probably get the point, but
So a question there.
The first thing I'd say is, Councillor Tilby, is that we're looking to rebalance the portfolio. We're still, if you read the DTZ report, says that we're looking still to hold about a third of the portfolio in ground leases. The second thing is, I suppose that if we had more directly managed properties, then we'd be closer to it, and therefore we would have taken action sooner. And I think the trouble that we've had of having 73% of our portfolio as ground leases, we've been one removed. So we've been in this sort of fool's paradise, thinking, oh, well, the rent keeps being paid, it's somebody else's problem. The fact that the building is getting tired and obsolete, well, it's not our issue. But of course, ultimately, it does become our issue, because what happens is the long leaseholder says, this is not worth anything to me, I'll hand you back the keys, Basingstoke and Dean. And that's what which has happened, yeah. And we just need to rethink our strategy, and this is what this is about, partly.
Councillor Harley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I'm very much with you on this one. I think from a cross-party perspective, I think there's not so much a but as it's one of those routines of when you read a report that 90%, an administration that we were running would almost write the same. The direction would be hopefully a few of the little more minor points I'd like to push you on, if you don't mind. On the area of where we might want to invest in the future, one of the issues being what's going to a COG and what isn't going to a COG. And at the moment, a lot of the housing stuff has been bumped off to the COG, but here it's talking about a different approach to what's been mentioned in other reports. So, I mean, not necessarily for an answer now, but I'd appreciate knowing which track of process are we going down, because I like what you've set out here in being far more active and more direct. And the other point really on that whole section relates to what we might do. And we keep talking here about joint ventures delivering private and affordable rent, without necessarily talking about what we've identified in our own reports we need, which is obviously social rent and a different target rent that would be appropriate for our residents. So again, the language here would slightly disagree with the emphasis you're striking on what you might invest in, we're agreeing with, and the same with the green energy. In terms of the 250k, Obviously, DTZ have done the report. My only thought was, consultants writing their own check routine of the due diligence of is the amount of money required to bring in the right amount of talent. Have we gone through that? I'm sure we have. But just to establish that and to say, in terms of appointing consultants, what sort of process are we intending to go through? I'd appreciate understanding that. Understand what you're talking about in terms of ground leasing and the shift away from that. I'd like to understand a little bit more about thoughts around regeneration and what you mean by that, and what the administration might mean by regeneration, because it's a big word that's got lots of meanings attached to it. And then in terms of divesting properties, my final point, Chair, is on the back of the presentation, on page 30 of the appendix, you've got a commercial property portfolio strategy, and right at the bottom of that page, it says reduced exposure to low value and low income properties, only retaining those where there is a genuine requirement for BDBC to retain ownership for socio-economic reasons. Just trying to get my head around what we would mean by that and what a process of assessment might look like, of trying to work out what buildings didn't fall into that meaning. It's good stuff, totally agree with the direction of travel you're going in, but it's just some of the detail to understand a little bit better. Appreciate it.
I'll try to remember all the points there. I shall probably fail. In terms of relationship to our housing policy and earmarking up to £25 million here, this is not in place of it. This runs alongside it, and we are looking at new ways to provide. We're going to be looking at new ways, I hope, to provide new housing, and at the same time meet the benchmark for monetary return on that. The appointment of consultants, DTZ writing their own check, that's not going to happen. I know that the officers around me are busting to get in at this point and clarify that, but clearly we're going to go through competitive procedures on this, and the figure that we've got is an estimate at the moment, and we're going to be looking to make sure we get absolutely best value. Kevin, do you want to say anything on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate that, but also to say that the report obviously outlines a number of areas where further technical support is needed, particularly around the housing side, around the renewable side, and on the commercial side for market intelligence. There would be a range of different initiatives, and those would be through the competitive tendering process, but also the initial plan would be through, if Cabinet approves the budget, would be through portfolio holder reports. So we'll be setting out the intention for those elements of support that's needed, because it will depend upon the types of areas that we're looking at. And as I say, I certainly know if you look at other councils and if they've gone through routes, it can be, you need very specific technical advice, whether it's financial or other, and that we would need to build those cases up. And that budget is, as I said, an initial estimate to enable some of that work to go ahead.
Just on the question of regeneration, I suppose that this is one of the tests that we're going to look at in determining where new investment should go, and we've talked about the potential benefits for the borough of investing in the town centre and the core. So that will be one of the things that we'll be looking to do. So whether that's site assembly or whether that is looking at an existing building that may have potential to be refurbished, we'll be looking at that. And we're going to have some interesting debates, I think, down the road on this, because we may need to be making decisions on investing in buildings where there will not be any guaranteed immediate income return, and everyone was going to have to make a decision whether that's something that risk is something that they're prepared to accept, and that the short-term, hopefully short-term loss of income is compensated for by the fact that we are acting as a catalyst in our own town to provide the new buildings that at the moment the market is seemingly unwilling to do in too many instances. Kevin, you or Mike, do you want to talk about the point that Councillor Harvey made about small, low-value properties that we may decide to keep just for socio-economic reasons?
In essence, we're developing a model which part of the DTZ brief was kind of the model, and we're going to put all the properties through that. Hasn't yet been done, got to be done, and it will actually sort of almost categorise properties. We believe there will be some which are going to be low value. Doesn't mean we should exit them all immediately, because it's a long-term strategy and it's a case whenever it's right to do it. And there will be some where, for particular reasons, we think it's worth keeping because, maybe the market's not right to sell, or maybe it has other benefits that need it. And if in doubt, I think the question would be to have a debate with the investment panel. And go through on that really, but at the moment we haven't got a hit list of buildings, and we're certainly not going to be sort of coming up with a big list and then popping all on the market in one big go. I just don't see that happening.
I think ward member input to that would be important, because I mean the amount of buildings I've seen over the years that have gained a new lease of life with different people taking them over and using them differently. I mean, the fact that they're council owned is the vehicle that enables that for most community groups. So I agree with that. I think if you were to include ward members, I mean, I know that obviously the cabinet report is already written and the decision notice is already written in the context of coming here and then going to cabinet. So that might be something to pick up with where you then go with this. In terms of what you said of all those other processes, I mean, what you do with the money in terms of the housing and the environmental investment, I think there's a piece of work perhaps there for one of the new committees to look at and to assist the cabinet in where our priorities as members would like to see that focus. And I think that's a very positive, round the table contribution that everybody could make to the cabinet decision on that, particularly when it comes to housing. For example, recently, and I think this is an issue for us, don't kind of where it fits in terms of our property portfolio, but I'm seeing it in others, the conversions of office blocks now to flats, with Weller and French Provident coming forward. Those are two prominent office blocks that are now being converted into residential accommodation in the town centre, all of which will be peaceful development, obviously. But the point being, it's a changing shape of those in the areas, particularly the house mills, and then obviously for the Brighton Industrial Estate, and our holdings in those areas, the values of them and what we might seek to do in the future would reflect obviously on what others were doing as well. So your land assembly point I think is important. Now, very much with you on that, but it's just how would members necessarily feed into that? I don't think a COG process with that is relevant. What you've set out here I think is the right vehicle, the right way of going forward. If you go down this road, will you bump it to a committee after May the 22nd and the new frame, May, June the 5th, when we get into the new council year, so that a committee can assist you in this? I think that would be very helpful. And in terms of your panel, it shouldn't necessarily be a members advisory panel to the cabinet member. I'd like to see it have a life of its own, really, in the sense of being a panel like Arga has spoken about something that's got a value of itself in advising you as the cabinet member of what you could and should be taking decisions on.
Councillor Reeve.
Thank you, Chair. Talking about the housing and regeneration investment, I know this is a work in progress, so it's not too specific at the moment. I just wanted to check something on here. We are talking, aren't we, about investing? We're not talking about managing housing stock with all the costs that will be associated if we started running our own stock of houses.
Certainly, my perspective would be that that it's not the best use of our resources. I don't think we are necessarily skilled and expert in running housing estates, apartments, flats. So it's better. I think it would be, from my perspective and the cabinet perspective, I think we would be looking to be working with partners.
Thank you. That is what I was assuming, but I don't think it's necessarily particularly clear, so it might perhaps need to be a little more clear in the paper or in future.
Councillor James, I'm sure we value your
Yes, who's here? Make sure that's recorded. I think I'm probably disappointed tonight. Reading through it, and obviously there's lots in there that I'm looking and thinking they've just cut and pasted over my budget speech about investing in renewable energy and housing. It's been marvellous. Yeah, I thought it first. There's no sort of, is there a vision? You look at the last 25 years and just dealing with property. The needs of commerce have changed dramatically. We've gone from when wanting small offices to open plan offices. They want car parking. They don't want car parking. They want the greenest buildings. They don't want the greenest buildings. They want big office blocks for headquarters. They want small floors in shared office blocks for regional offices. It changes, it moves all the time, and obviously we've been caught out in a sense with a lot of property that no longer fits that purpose, and that's part of the reason why we're here today. In all that time, the need for housing has never gone away. There's always a demand for housing, and housing pretty much, the houses we had 30 years ago are still very good houses now if you're in need. What sort of mix, if we go down the housing route, we find a way of making it deliver a return, and obviously because of the social benefits, it doesn't need to have the same financial benefits, but there has to be some. Have we got a mix in mind in terms of 70% will be property, 20% will be housing, 10% renewable, any kind of, or is it just, we just have a strategy, but we've not got no end game to the strategy? Is what I mean.
Yes.
Yeah, as you've gleaned from the report, no, we haven't got that sort of portfolio mix as an overall strategy. It may well be that gets developed, but at the moment there isn't a mix for that, and that's why the strategy is just giving the themes, and particularly on the housing and renewable themes, that obviously they're not worked up in anywhere near the level of detail of the commercial property, and that's again back to the further work that's needed. Some of that work is needed to build up those strategies for the council, informed by what the council's vision and objectives are on those, and then the mix will come from that. So there isn't a mix in place at the moment, or even in vision between the split between the commercial and the others. But as the point that you made, overall, this is funding, if the council agrees it, is funding that is currently invested, that's earning interest to support services. So it's got to make a level of return, so that some of the mix would be about how the level of return is generated as well.
Clearly the return on housing will be lower, but it's a very stable stream of income compared to commercial properties where one company can go bankrupt and you've lost a huge amount of revenue per year. In terms of renewable, I mean, we've listed some examples and we talk about the urban core. If there was land outside of the main urban area of Basingstoke that became available that was very suitable for a wind farm, to say, would we be saying, yes, actually, that would be an investment opportunity we would look at if it made the return? Obviously, again, you've got the social value in terms of tackling climate change and providing renewable energy and providing the countryside with some attractive windmills that I know will be deeply popular. Is that something that, I mean, we mentioned solar. Are we still open-minded to wind farms?
Yes, we're open-minded and we'll discuss these things, but clearly, we need to be very careful about the views of to pick up on Councillor Harvey's point before, of the local ward councillors on these things and the residents in an area that might be being proposed for a wind farm. So, this is where it's going to be very interesting discussing these things in the members panel. So.
I've got nobody else down on my list, so I shall say we go over to discussion now. That killed that, didn't it? Councillor Gardner.
See if I can spark some discussion for saying something totally outrageous. I commend what's being suggested. It probably is overdue, if not due. It's about time we actually did look at our stock. And we have got a lot of low returning stock, which frankly is more of a drain on our resources than it is an advantage. And that really is where the legacy systems have broken down, because they have had so much small stuff to deal with, and they haven't been able to concentrate to the same extent on the important things. So this is a good way forward to resolve those issues. You've heard my comments on the panel and membership of that. I think, yes, I'm quite happy to vote for it. Well, I say vote for it. Commend it to Cabinet.
I've got Councillor Franken. Councillor Harvey, did you put your hand up, or was it your eyebrows? Okay, thank you. And then Councillor James afterwards.
Well, I don't know whether I've got a simplistic view, but I've lived in the area for 40 odd years, nearly 50 years, and I'd like to see us go to include small business, start-up businesses, because I think from the small businesses, little acorns, big oaks grow. I think we also need to look at the diversity of retail shops, because there's so much done on the web now that people don't come into town. So maybe we can think about some of the properties or what we can do there. I know we spoke earlier about indoor market and all that sort of thing. Am I assuming correctly then that this will be part of discussion of the panel?
Councillor James.
Yeah, I think I think it's a great paper. Support just about all of it. I think is an excellent idea, and hope the portfolio holder agrees with me. He doesn't normally, but on this occasion we will. The only one concern I have, and it's against this flow of decision making. We've all been on those maps where one of us has turned up and been told it's been cancelled because no one else was turning up, and I'm often one of the ones that hasn't turned up. I admit it. But this PAP, whatever it's called, will obviously meet. It could have a very, very small attendance and doesn't really give any advice to the portfolio holder, who then goes to cabinet, makes a decision, and if it's a big decision there seems to be limited opportunity. I appreciate sometimes the pace is so important that we have to make a decision now, we have to sign contracts, we have to draw up things, and those decisions got to go flow through. The portfolio holder ultimately has to come back and explain himself to a scrutiny committee if we've got questions about that. But where speed is not of the essence, there still needs to be a certain size of investment, a certain size of decision, where, if time allows, that it should go through an additional process, that where it's appropriate, it goes for a policy committee as well, one of the new committees, whichever one's most appropriate. Because obviously we are talking often very big buildings, very big investments. We're talking decisions that are going to outlast any of us. It might be 4 weeks in my case, but it's going to, these decisions, we're shaping the borough for the next 30, 40 years. Long after we've gone, people are going to put up with our mistakes. So I think where possible, there should always go to a committee for a greater level of scrutiny where that's possible. I appreciate it's not always, but I don't think we should be rushing through decisions, detaching many of the councillors who might want to get involved in their decisions by not taking it to a public committee at some point.
Just one additional point there. Of course, there is always the opportunity for call-in if something is viewed being contentious.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I agree with the direction of travel of the paper. No real issue with the strategy either in terms of what you're putting together. I thought the workshop was really useful, actually. The workshop that was held gave us an opportunity to go into this in some detail and to understand direction of travel. I can understand the need to bring on a set of consultants. I hear what's been said. I think, our officer team have done a tremendously good job in managing the portfolio thus far, and adding to that talent with consultants in the way it's described in here, I can understand. So appreciate the tendering process and all you've said, and look forward to seeing that and to see, who can actually come up to scratch to do the job we want to do. The community buildings bit is interesting because we're talking about our whole portfolio, and we can talk about the big nuggets in terms of the industrial estates and in terms of the land masses that are involved in some of that. But when it comes to some of the more niche community facilities that we have ownership of inside estates, inside wards, that perhaps we do want to take just a step back. I hear what the officers have said in regard to that, and I do take that. It gives us an opportunity just to reflect on what they might be for the future. That's a good thing. So I'm endorsing that, very much supporting your direction of travel. I notice John wants to come in. Shall I stop for a moment? John, you want to come?
I agree with you entirely, and we need to tread very carefully on that. But there's also another point here, is that there may be instances where it's more appropriate for us to look to sell the ownership to that community. And so it doesn't seem to me always the case that it's appropriate for the council to be owning a particular asset in a community.
I think the management of the community facility is one thing, selling it to a group and the sustainability of that for that group over a longer term is quite a decision to try to make, particularly if that group is a collective and they're relying on multiple sources of funding to achieve what they want. I mean, the community right to buy element of the whole localism agenda has been one of the most underused elements. I think last year there was only one or two proposals even made across the whole of the country. So, there's an awful lot of very tentative thinking around that. Like the idea, but a community group taking on such a big financial risk is not easy. In terms of the housing bit, I mean, straightforwardly, with all due respect to Councillor Reid, I don't fear this council at all taking on the responsibility of the housing, and I think there are so many other authorities, both Conservative, Liberal Democrat and Labour around the country that are doing that, and they're making a good return. We didn't we, in the workshop, and as we said at ARGA consistently, the return on our investments is not what we want it to be at the moment. The 2% isn't good enough. And it was a shame in some ways that Sentinel went onto the open market to raise all their capital recently, all their investment fund, and didn't look to us to help. And that sort of relationship with partners around is something that we should have, because we could have done something quite special there with our land, their thoughts, their initiative as a social housing association. As that was something perhaps as a future vehicle we might want to look to. And that goes for us building houses on our side as much as colleagues have got their ideas of their flat pack homes. Noticing that in the recent piece of literature that came through my door. The point being, we've all got ideas around the table. How we achieve that so that you can make some decisions, I think it's going to be an interesting experience next year. So, yeah, if you have a panel and the panel makes a decision, great. If the panel doesn't meet, you still make a decision and need to make a decision. Perhaps there needs to be just an element that the group leaders in the old system, the old urgent decision system, which is where most of the property elements was taken before, most of them came through the old urgent decision system. You might still want that as a fallback, because it might be the case that there is something so special, so important, that you just can't wait for the committee cycle, but you've got to have democratic oversight of it. So you might just want to think of a fallback position, and I think we would support that.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support this paper. I'm very happy to say that. I will obviously continue to agree with Councillor Harvey about council housing, obviously. I think one of the reasons we're such a financially secure council is that we've had our property investment portfolio. So hopefully improving that and improving the income from that will just enable us to continue to meet our council priorities and hopefully continue to keep council tax low as well.
Councillor Mrs. Frankham.
Yes, so just kind of like one assurance. When you're talking about community buildings, etc., and probably going to the community to come in and do it themselves, we are talking about a community and not converting it to, say, for instance, I don't know, a church or something like that. It would be retained as for community use to serve the whole community.
This really is focused on the investment properties as opposed to what used to be called operational properties. So the community centres themselves, they'll be managed in a different way.
I have nobody else on my list. The recommendation. Councillor Tilbury. Sorry.
Well, no, just to say, I mean, obviously we talked about sort of looking at acquiring a portfolio of homes to provide rental accommodation to ease homelessness. We sort of suggested whether council should run them or not. Well, it's not realistic if you own 50 or 100 houses. There's a large cost of management. But I think we do need to seriously look at the way we do manage them, particularly if you're looking to ease homeless pressures and. Because there is an issue with management. Will we put them through a housing association? We have sort of. That's one potential way, that we would own them and get them to manage them. But I mean, given the way they manage their own properties, I'd have not exactly the best experience I've had over the years dealing with housing associations. I've spent a lot of today trying to get some answers out of some of them, which is becoming increasingly difficult. So if we are going to go down that route, then I think we need a better working relationship with the housing associations where we can deal with those sorts of issues, because, we threw these people to the wolves when we transfer the houses, and and that was going to be, we would have councillors on the board, we'd have tenants involved. That's all gone now, so the tenants don't have much control over what's going on. I don't really want to, create another load of tenants and put them in the same position. We want to keep some control this time, so. Because it's not like you can just put them through an estate agent, is it? I mean, possibly private housing, that would probably work reasonably well, but then there are issues then with you'd like to think we would be a good landlord, wouldn't you? That's the point, and that was always the advantage of a council house, At least you've got problems, you can go and kick your local councillor, couldn't you? No, they come and kick us, well, we can't do anything much about it. Well, I don't, just want to make sure we don't get into that situation again. We need, whoever we get to manage these, we need to be able to manage them. I think that's the point.
I think that's a fair point, and perhaps we need to expand the number of partners that we are working with.
We did used to have a list of preferred partners at one point, and I know one of them, in fact, Kingfisher got kicked off at one point, didn't they? And then they managed to get back on again, but we did work that way, but that seems to have gone by the by now. I mean, and of course Kingfisher, they're part of Sovereign, and they're getting, and this is the other issue, they're becoming more regional, so they're becoming more remote. I mean, Sentinel seemed to be a better one, but it may be that's just a case of the grass is greener, there are none of them in my ward. I have to deal with Sovereign and Affinity Sutton, so, but, I think that's the thing, we need to make sure that they are good partners.
Right, thank you very much. The recommendations are before you. Agreed with recommendations? Thank you very much. Councillor Harvey.
Just to say, on do the page, on 2.4, when you got endorsed the proposed earmarking of 25 million, just to point out that support the recommendations, but we could not support a joint venture to deliver private and affordable rent properties. We do genuinely disagree with that, and I want it on the record. Thank you.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Right, item C. It's to note more than anything, isn't it? Any questions? Okay, to note. Well, I'd like to thank you all very much. This is my last Economic Prosperity and Performance Overview Committee, as it's the last one. And thank you all, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.